name is Josh Wilson. I'm Manager of City Assets and also Sports Legacy and Activation at Latrobe City Council. Here to quickly provide a brief introduction for our guest tonight, Ryan Smith. Ryan joins us from the Access Agency and has helped us develop the Universal Tourism grants that he's going to talk to you about tonight that have launched today and are open for the next 6 weeks. Just a couple of quick things about Ryan quickly. He's a qualified access consultant, has presented on accessibility in tourism throughout Australia and globally, including for Tourism Australia, Visit Victoria and the World Travel Market. In addition, Ryan is an ambassador for the Australian Regional Tourism and was a judge for 2023 Victorian Tourism Awards, making him perfectly placed to present to us tonight on the new Universal Tourism grant. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ryan, who'll start off with an acknowledgement of country and then get into it. Thanks very much.
There we go. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. G'day, everybody. Thanks for coming along tonight. Thank you especially for those who may have travelled a little bit out of their way to come along today. As Josh said, my name is Ryan. I'm from the Access Agency, but I'm here to talk to you today about the upcoming UTG grants, the Universal Tourism Grant Program. My job today is not an easy one because I need for you guys to go away understanding how rare an opportunity this is. This is an incredible opportunity. I'm going to sound a little bit like a sales guy as I start to step through this presentation. You'll have to forgive me on that, but I've worked in this sector in universal, inclusive and accessible tourism. I've worked in this space for 8 years. This is what I do. This is my full-time gig, and I have never seen an opportunity like this across Australia. This is a once in multi-decade opportunity. So my responsibility is for you guys to take away an understanding of how rare an opportunity this is and the massive material difference that you can make to your communities and your businesses and not-for-profits. So not a small task, right? I'm a little bit nervous. I talk about this a lot, but today's kind of extra special. First up, does everybody have one of these? Yep. If you don't have one, they're over there. The green one is for not-for-profits. The purple one is for small business. So I will start off with an acknowledgement of country. We're on Gunai-Kurnai land, and I want to pay respects to their past to the original explorers and travellers of this land, and also want to pay respects to the disabled travellers and leaders that have allowed me to be here today, and pay respect to both of those groups and acknowledge their contribution to where we are today. So yes, today is the launch of I'm going to keep calling it UTG. It's the Universal Tourism Grant Program. This, as I said, is a pretty incredible opportunity. This is Latrobe City Council. I feel like I'm the self-appointed ambassador for these grants, and I'm working with Latrobe City Council on both structuring them and letting people know about how important and how valuable they are. Today there'll be a session towards the end when we've got some time for Q&A, and I really want you to kind of be engaged so that when we get to the end of this session, we're all sort of learning off one another. And don't be afraid to ask any questions, because there's a good chance that the questions you ask will be answered for somebody else in the room, but also we're recording today, so anybody that is watching this after the fact, after today, may have the question that you might want to ask today. So do that for yourself to get the answer. Do that for the people in the room and the people at home as well. Don't be shy. There's plenty of time and there's no silly questions. We are here to empower you to make great decisions around this grant. Like I said, this is probably the best, when I say best, the most generous and the most influential grant, I want to say, that I've ever seen in Victoria. It is multilateral, and by that I mean it's not specifically around changing places, toilets, or it's not assigned specifically to an access element. This is really quite broad, and we're actually talking about universal design, and I hope you'll see as we step through today that universal design is a really integral quality of great tourism product. It's not just about wheelchairs and disabilities. If we start to use this principle in the way we think about applying these grants, it actually opens up the benefits to your operations in a much wider way than maybe you previously thought. So as we said before, green is for not-for-profits, the purple red is for small businesses. The amount available is the same for both organisations. The contributions are slightly different, but we will, most of those questions around the grant I feel will be answered in those little one pages you have there. And as I said, we'll have a Q&A session towards the end of this session today as well. So like I said, I've been working in this space for quite a long time, 8 years, significant amount of time right across Australia, and like I said, it is a pretty remarkable opportunity. Just a little bit about me. I've got arthritis in my knees, so that's the reason I'm in a wheelchair. So I've got sensation in my legs, I have a bit of strength, but my knees, yeah, had it. So that's the reason I use the chair. The arthritis, lucky me, has a kind of a side effect as well. So I'm actually blind in one eye. So this is a prosthetic. So not trying to collect disabilities. That's not the way it works. There's no sort of scorecard with that. I'm just letting you know where I'm coming from, sort of as a consumer of tourism products, to let you know that I understand what it's like to be a customer of you guys. But also working in this field, I have a pretty solid understanding of what it's like to be on your side as well. But here to help you as much as I can when it comes to providing you the scope of what's available within these grants, and what's in that remit, and how you can make a material benefit to the visitors that come to you. So we're going to start off with sort of some language to begin with. It feels like access and inclusion and diversity and universe, all of these terms seem to get thrown around quite a lot. And you'd be forgiven for not really understanding what they actually mean at the moment. But if we look at it in two ways, access is around the physical space. So access is the way you walked to get to your chair tonight. It's the way I will roll through that doorway and get to the car park and get to the toilets. Access is predominantly about the physicality of spaces, whereas inclusion is about how I feel when I'm in those spaces. So I can go to fancy restaurants and they can be really accessible and really wonderful from that physical point of view, but if I feel like I'm a bit of a burden or, you know, not welcomed, then the access is there but the inclusion isn't, right? And there's plenty of opportunities, or plenty of instances, I should say, where I've felt included but the access hasn't been there. You know, if I go to a friend's birthday party and there's a few steps to get up into the venue, you know, my mates will help me and I'll get up there and I'll feel welcomed and included, but the access isn't great, right? So they're the two parts, access, inclusion. When we apply that to tourism product and the visitor economy, you know, there's different terminology, and it's inclusive tourism and barrier-free tourism. Basically what it means is that everybody can participate equally when they arrive at your venue or your offering, right? It simply means that equity is in place and that everybody's welcomed and everybody has the ability to participate next to their friends, next to their family, in the same way, more or less, as much as they possibly can, in the same way. And that's where we start to get those barriers, because the offering's there, but the way people engage with it, sometimes we find barriers as a community of, I'm speaking as a disabled consumer, sometimes we'll find those barriers not necessarily across the board, but there'll be elements of barriers sometimes, the way we participate with our friends and the way we're, sometimes the way we're welcomed as well. So I will talk about disability to start with, and then we'll sort of skew and start to look into universal design and how that sort of solves problems. Access is different for everybody, so what's going to work for me as a wheelchair user in a manual wheelchair is going to be very different to what, say, a 100 kilo motorised wheelchair user is going to experience, right? So they're going to have different ways and access needs that I do. And that goes right across the board, right? Somebody who's blind or low vision or has hearing loss or is deaf is going to have a different experience to me, right? So everybody's going to take their lived experience and the physicality of their body, the way they make their way through this world. We all experience tourism differently, and there's always ways to improve. There's never really an end point to this stuff, because there's always, even if you remove the bigger barriers, there's still smaller things that can be improved upon. Access needs and disability and universal design also affect people in different ways at different times. And I love this illustration because it talks to the temporary nature of some disabilities, and it also talks to the idea that they can be situational as well. So you might think coming to somewhere, if you're carrying some stock, for example. For those of you who have stock, potentially if you're carrying something through a set of doors and the doors are really heavy, that becomes a barrier, right? What we're looking to do, yes, it's a barrier. Maybe it can be overcome. Maybe it's getting in the way. But what we're looking at is making those experiences really seamless, really frictionless. So if you were carrying some stock, you're trying to get through a heavy door, wouldn't it be much easier if you just had a button, right? Or if the automatic doors opened, right? That's kind of a situational access need. So you might not need that button or that sensor every single day, but if it's there on the day when you need it, that makes your life easier, right? And the thing about access needs and the thing about solving those problems is that if you solve it for one instance, and usually if you solve it for a person with a particular disability, everybody else around them will benefit from it. So when you solve that problem for yourself, bringing stock in the door, you're actually solving it for somebody who's a wheelchair user. You're actually making that easier for somebody who has a pram with young kids. So you can see this kind of halo effect that happens when you solve that problem once. There's lots of different people in your community and visitors to your venue that are going to benefit from that change, from that upgrade and that improvement. As a segment of the visitor economy, as a segment of the tourism industry, if we put it that way, if you wrote a list, we would be the perfect cohort, right? We stay longer, we spend more. As a group, we're likely to return if we have good experiences. We travel with more than one or two people, usually. And we travel off-season as well, so we'll travel outside of peak periods. So there's lots of reasons why we make great customers as well, and great mental blank. Why we make great customers, clientele, great visitors. Right? We're very we hold a lot of qualities that people are looking for when it comes to longevity, when it comes to particularly sort of that off-season element, and the number of people that we travel with is a really big one. We are a growing cohort as well. There's relatively new research that says that internationals or inbound travellers, 25% of them have access needs, which is a huge amount. I don't know anybody in any business that can say, oh, you know what, we're not going to worry about this 25% of our revenue. That's a large amount to begin with, right? And with these grants, you're going to have the opportunity to tap in to that massive cohort, that massive segment. And we're growing year on year. You're probably not surprised to hear that as we age, we're more likely to experience disability, and as we age, we still want to keep travelling, right? Nobody wants to stop. We still want to get out and do things, maybe even more so. Like I said before, we're not only talking about disability. What we're talking about is universal design. So if we look at it in layers, there's a basic layer around the built environment. There's a requirement around accessibility. From a legal perspective in new buildings, there is minimum standards that must be met. And it's in the building code, and it's in the, call them kind of legislative instruments that say, right, if you're going to build a library or a hotel, they need to meet certain minimum standards around accessibility, right? What we're talking about here today is actually broadening that, going further and saying, okay, what's that layer that sits above accessibility that we can use to inform better visitor experiences? Now that's what we're talking about today. That's universal design. And the best way to explain this is when I think about this, the example that comes to mind is my niece. Right? She's the same height as me. She's 10 years old. Right? Her name's Valeria. We have the same eye line, right? So when we go into a room or a space, her and we see from the same height. We can reach the same height, up and down, right? And when I have a bit of an arthritis flare up, we have the same grip strength. So if you design a space that works for me, it works for Valeria as well, right? It works for everybody. So my point is, when we look at universal design, we're actually breaking open and we're breaking that myth around disability. This is around usability. This is around making spaces and your offerings more usable for everybody. You've already seen universal design. You know what it looks like, right? Universal design, we used to design things that were kind of fixed, right? That's the image on the left. You know, we're going to put these binoculars in at this park and they're going to be at this height because most people are at this height. Well, that seems crazy because most people is not all people. Don't we want all people to be able to use it? So that's when you get these ideas of, okay, well, we'll have one at a higher height and one at a lower height. Now, if I look at that, I think we can do better than that as well. Why not have it adjustable? Maybe it's a little wider. You can make it up, you can tailor it, you can make it go up and down, right? So what we're talking about is having those things where everybody can participate. Not having a separate one just for, you know, that sort of people, those sorts of people, disabled people or older people or younger people or whatever it may be. Just one product that works for everybody. So universal design is based on 7 principles. I'm not going to go through them, but a couple of them refer to equitable use and, you know, low physical effort. The other one which I like, which is tolerance for error. So you can't really kind of get it wrong. Tolerance of error is about like big buttons, things like that. If I don't have the dexterity to find a small button, it's a bigger button, those sorts of things. So universal principles in the tourism space, really important. You've also seen it as well probably at playgrounds and parks. If you've ever been to a playground recently and you see 3 different swing types, maybe one's got a harness, one's kind of the regular swing, maybe one's the, they call them the bird's nest, the round ones that swing around. They're not designed to give the same kids a different experience. They're designed so that different kids can join in and have that swinging experience, right? But they're designed for kids with different needs. So you've already seen it in your everyday life. You would have seen it coming in here today. This is a really good example. This building is a really good example of how universal design has been employed in the built environment. When you go out, have a look at those door handles. The door handles are black on a white door. That's not just an aesthetic. That's also for people with low vision, right? So if you've got really, you know, cataracts or you've got some deficiency in your vision, you're able to see that because of the high contrast, right? Really smart, like pretty straightforward when you think about it, but actually really clever. Universal design. You'll see it everywhere when you start to look for it. What I'll do is I will skip this one. We'll keep moving for the sake of time. The first part I want you to think about when you might be considering this grant for your organisation, for your business, is kind of the basics, right? We're going to look at two parts now. One is basic fundamental accessibility. How do you improve the accessibility, how people move around in your space? We're going to look at that from the fundamental point of view. And then the second part is we're going to look at how you might stretch that and how you might think about utilising the grant funding in maybe a more unique, kind of innovative way. Yeah. Look, it's not sexy. It's not the most glamorous stuff, but it is absolutely crucial for people with access needs that we get some basic stuff right. We need to be able, as a consumer group, as a visitor, I need to be able to use the toilet and I need to be able to park my car. right? You know, these are the fundamental things that we have to get right. So if you're looking at this in terms of your business, start with this stuff, right? Start with the doorway, start with the ramps, you know, start with the parking and the toilets. Absolutely crucial, right? And usually, more often than not, pardon me, you'll find that there is deficiencies in the way these elements are applied in your business. That's just the way of the world, right? There's always improvements that can be made with those rudimentary, fundamental, basic accessibility requirements. You know, you might be able to step back and go, what are the small things that we can do if we don't want to do, you know, a $25,000 project? Are there things that we can do which are small, low-cost improvements we can make to the spaces and the places that we already have control over? And that may be as simple as changing a tap head, right? This is a universally designed tap head. It means that if somebody has low dexterity with their hands, those star capstan sort of tops, tap heads, terrible. They're really difficult. I don't know if you're like me, but even I have trouble with them. You know, they're like, why would you? I don't even know how that design came about. They're really difficult to use. These ones you can use if you've got your hands full. You can use your elbow. You can use your wrist. People with spinal cord injuries that don't have a lot of dexterity in their hands can use their fist. You know, it just small change, big impact. For those of you who have venues, looking at acoustics is a really good idea, a really good place to start. I did notice, and I looked at a couple of websites of the attendees here tonight, and I noticed not all of them have acoustics in place, and there is a lot of hard flooring and hard roofing. And you know this better than I do, but there's a good chance that you're going to get echo, you're going to get kind of noise bouncing around, and you're going to get a less than optimal experience from a sonic, from a sound point of view. And if those groups that you have if you notice that the volume goes up very high very quickly and becomes distracting, or it becomes less than ideal, you know, these are, I'll just give you an example here, but those ceiling acoustic elements, they're $1,000 for 10 panels, and you could potentially, I don't want to go into solutions mode per se, but you know, you could potentially find a way for somebody to apply them and get them in place for you, and you're going to see that benefit. Relatively low cost, fairly big experience enhancement. Automatic doors, I've already spoken about that. They can be absolutely a real kind of bring material benefit to people, not only visitors but also people in the venue. If you've got staff carrying plates, carrying materials through the premises, sensor doors are a great way to make their lives a bit easier. And certainly from me as a wheelchair user, they're very handy, very handy. Changing a basin, removing a vanity so that you've got. If you're a wheelchair user, you can pull up and actually use the basin properly rather than not be able to use it, or use it with difficulty on the side. If you provide that clearance underneath the vanity, that's going to bring material benefit to people as well. Some of these things that I'm talking about today are requirements around accessibility from a formal point of view, and what I mean by that is if you were to build a brand new bathroom, you would have to put a basin like that in place for it to meet the construction code. So you can do that work without refitting the entire bathroom. You can choose elements to improve, or you can refit the entire bathroom. Right? That's up to you. The thing to think about, if you're going to refit the whole bathroom, make sure that you've got somebody to do that work who understands what the building requirements are. Yeah. There's some really great examples out there of work that's been done in the accessibility space, particularly in accommodation, where the accessible offering is actually a really elegant solution. So whatever you're putting in place from a universal design point of view and to improve the access, you can actually make that really stylish as well. Right? It doesn't have to be really clinical and hospital-like. It can be quite elegant solution as well, and that's true for everything, not only bathrooms. This is a hotel in Ballarat called the Hotel Vera. This is like $400 or $500 a night, and this is a completely accessible room. When you roll in, the lights, there's got sensor lights in there, the lights come up. The bathroom has these kind of elegant brass handrails. My point in bringing this to you is not to say, let's go into a fantastically amazing, elegant bathroom, but to get you thinking, okay, if we're going to do this, if we're going to make these improvements around universal design and improvements around accessibility, how do we do it in a way that keeps with the aesthetic of our place? And how do we do it in a way that stylistically is going to sit with our brand, right? But also is bringing those improvements to people with the access needs as well. Some obvious things around accessibility in terms of service of customers, service areas, and I saw them on the way in before. This is employed in this space, which is really great. Low counters. I noticed there is a few examples of organisations, businesses in the room where the counters are quite high. That can be a barrier, or it is a barrier. Certainly when I go to a hotel or a cafe or a restaurant, I don't want to be looking up like that. I want to be, have an open experience. Signage, again, is another opportunity, which is a great one that sort of fits in with this grant program. Now, signage around toilets is mandatory, but there's also some wayfinding that you might want to put in that may have braille or a tactile element that's not mandatory from a wayfinding point of view, but would really be an enhancement and improvement for people with low vision or blindness. This is another example of some evacuation equipment here for people with mobility issues, people with low mobility. If you want to get creative from a evacuation and emergency management point of view, what is it that you've got in place for people with different access needs? How do you get somebody who is blind or has low vision, when the fire alarm goes off, how do you get them out of your property? Have a think about that. There's ways that you could think about applying that grant funding to the whole sort of more equitable, inclusive evacuation process, emergency process. Again, around the tactile element, because I think this is really important, kind of quite often sort of overlooked. Mapping is really important. You could, if you have a larger sort of space, I think Gippstown is here. Is Gippstown here? You guys, great. You've got quite a large property. I would love to see that map done in a tactile way, so that people with low vision could kind of work their way around using a tactile map, and then they would be able to self-navigate. Very true for interpretive signage as well. So if you have a museum, an offering that requires signage to be in place in order for people to really understand what is on offer, and a great way to bring that to life with tactile elements. I did talk about contrast before, so really thinking about how contrast might work for people with low vision is a really important one. I was talking about the handles before. The same thing goes for things like switches, any kind of controls. Think about them from the point of view of somebody with low vision, then contrast is going to be really important to help them utilise those features in a space. Right, so all of that is about providing equitable participation to allow families to utilise spaces and tourism offerings in the same way, so that everybody can stand side by side or sit side by side and really make the most of it and be included and feel included. What we're talking about now is sort of looking at more innovative ways where you might look at this grant and go, what's something really special? What's something exceptional we could do about this? Do with our offering in order to make it really one of a kind, really unique, so that people will travel for it. Because trust me, people will travel for it. If you have something really different and really inclusive, People will go out of their way to come and visit you. And that could be school groups, it could be individuals and families. There's a wakeboarding place, I don't know if you've heard of it, but they get people from miles away to go wakeboarding because it's part of their offering is seated, right? So and they've got a name for themselves in that space because they do this unique thing. Transport is a really big one. At the moment, may not seem particularly innovative, but it certainly is a real gap at the moment. There is a massive disconnection between places that are inclusive and accessible and getting to them. Not everybody drives, and quite often there's right across the country actually, and I would say this globally, there's a deficiency and a real gap in providing accessible transport. And that could be buses or vans or whatever it may be, but there's a real gap there. This is this is another sort of example, but this is something that you might think about. This is an outdoor sort of glamping tents. You know, they've made one of these tents a little bit wider, a little bit more space, and they've made sure that the bathroom on the block is inclusive and accessible as well. So there's not many things really that can't be made more inclusive and more accessible. I've seen helicopters and like boats and, you know, horse riding, almost anything you can think of, kayaking, zip lining, you name it, right? It can always be improved and tweaked to be made more inclusive and more accessible so that you can reach a bigger market. And, you know, speaking of which, right, basically what we're looking at when we think about these things is solving the into and out of problem. And I've sort of paraphrased this from an operator in New Zealand called Jezza Williams, and he does a lot of work in the outdoor and adventure space. And I'm paraphrasing this and condensing it down to the into and out of problem, right? The way I do a kayak, the way I use a kayak, the way I use a zip line or ride a horse is pretty much the same way you do. The issue is getting into and out of that thing, right? So if you can solve that in a really creative way, then you're actually opening up the opportunity for everybody to participate. And again, you are actually opening up your business to more and more visitors, more and more customers. Quite often when we travel as a family, we will look for places that I can be included and activities that I can do, right? And so the decision of 5 of us is made on what I can do, one person. So if you fix it for one person, you're actually welcoming 5 people. So there's a real kind of awareness or awakening, I suppose, around that understanding of what we call the ratio, that ratio of person with access need to traveller party. Again, we start looking at outdoor and different experiences, things like pool accessibility is a good one. This is a hotel in Brisbane. I don't know why you'd want to do this, but it's an elevated experience. You sort of hang off the side of you hang off the side of this building, and at the end of it, you lower it down. I think it's about 6 stories or something. Not for me, 4 stories, I should say. Not for me, but you know, if that's what you're into, that's fine. But they've made this inclusive. They've designed this in a way where if you're a wheelchair user, you can participate in this as well. So there's not much. They've made the Colosseum accessible. So, you know, there's not much that can't be made more inclusive and more universally designed so that everybody can participate. Be creative. Think about what your offering is or what new offering you might want to bring into what you already have and how you can design that and implement that in a way that's more inclusive. Sometimes it's small things. Sometimes it's about moving things from low to high. Sometimes it's about creating spaces or times when people can come in and have experiences where it's less overwhelming, it's less noisy, the light's adjusted, you know, tailoring those experiences so that people can come and feel your offering and feel the sense of place without being overwhelmed too much, and participate the same way everybody else does, but in a way that's slightly more tailored for what their needs might be. You know, another example, I love this example, this is a drawing class in a gallery for people who are blind or low vision. I mean, I would never have guessed that people who are blind or low vision would want to do drawing classes, but there you go. So don't ever sort of assume that, oh, well, you know, that's a person in a wheelchair, so they won't want to use the bath. Or that's a blind person, so they won't want to do our drawing class. You know, keep an open mind on this stuff, and you might be surprised, and you might actually find yourself with a really niche kind of market around this stuff, because it's very, very specialised. You may end up developing a product that's very, very unique, and you become known for that. And as I said, people will travel for that. You have a broader sort of opportunity, I suppose, around doing something that Visit Victoria, Tourism Australia, they're always looking for things that are a little bit out of the ordinary, that are really unique to a region and even to Australia. So you might find yourself, if you develop a project, that it finds itself profiled in a bigger sort of way than you might expect. So that's about, you know, providing extraordinary inclusive moments, things in your offering where it's that little bit different, and really sort of stretching that idea around innovation and participation and inclusion. So, you know, really, it's not expensive to be inclusive and accessible. It's actually expensive not to be. Like I said before, 25%. If anybody in this room can leave 25% of their tourism revenue on the table, then, you know, I'd be very, very surprised. Latrobe City Council has developed some resources for you. We want to make this as easy as we possibly can for you. We have the one-pagers, which we have here for you today. There will be a PDF that will allow you to find more information, which is sort of a stepping stone that will prepare you for the grants process. Answer any questions around your eligibility, around project ideas, those sorts of things. And obviously there's the web page, which will detail all of that information around the criteria and the co-contribution requirements, the timings and all the rest of that, the more of the details around that. But like I said before, and I still feel like I haven't delivered this with the amount of emphasis that I wanted to, but please understand, this is a once in a 20-year opportunity. Like, grants like this just do not come along. They don't. So if you're not, if you're in the room and you're like, yeah, that'd be good, but it's not for me, tell someone in the supermarket that you know. Like, if you tell the people in your industry, tell your neighbours, tell anyone else that has a tourism operation, or tourism offering, I should say, if this is not for you, tell them, because this is an extraordinary opportunity. Tell them at the pub, at the supermarket, when you're picking up the kids, whatever it may be. Let them know that there is a massive opportunity here for them to do extraordinary things in the visitor economy space, because opportunities like this do not come along often, and you have a real opportunity and almost a responsibility to really increase that improvement and increase that universal access and really welcome more customers, right? There's no downside to this. There we go. We're going to jump into Q&A. Has anyone got any questions after that? Yes?
With the civil limit of 25,000, so does that mean that you can have a project worth 50,000 and the council then funds 25,000 channels? Thank you for that. Is that working? Yep. For small businesses, said a $25,000 maximum grant. Does that mean you can have a $50,000 project and the council will fund up to $25,000 then?
That's correct. Yep. And there's in-kind contributions as well. So if you want to, if of your 25 grand, if you can find somebody to contribute in a non-monetary way, then that in-kind can make up half of your contribution.
Thank you. Just talking about Old Gippsland, which we're from.
Yep.
Big site.
Yep.
How do we get it right? I mean, from the point of view, do we need to go through and get someone to assist us to make sure that we're getting this right?
I would say yes. You could potentially look for disability groups within the region. You could go to access consultants, you could go to advisory services. You really do want somebody who knows the lay of the land, because you want bang for buck, right? That's what we all want. You want to make sure that the barriers that you're solving for are going to be the top of the list, not in the middle or the bottom. You want to make sure that whenever you do the work, it's really having that material benefit. And the only way to do that, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but the only way to do that really well is to get somebody who really knows what those barriers are to start with. And it could mean not going to one person, but maybe going to three different areas. Maybe going to one advisor around blind or low vision, go to another advisor around deaf and hard of hearing, get some autism resources, speak to somebody about neurodiversity, talk to somebody around physicality. I can't give you a specific go-to on that, but it might be a few resources. It could be somebody who knows the breadth of the space. If you have somebody that has, in your circle or in your network, that has a disability that you know is a visitor, that has been a few times, or who understands the space, then start there, right? But you do want to get a second opinion. You do want to quantify this stuff so that when you do start to go into solutions mode, you're solving the right problems.
Would there be an opportunity for this funding to fund a report that we could actually then, I suppose, look at it as part of a progress?
Yeah, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. It's something we did speak about a lot, but we want to, we will get back to you on and clarify that for you, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess from council's perspective, if you do have questions like those, more than happy to make contact with either grants officer or Hayley in the back here, who can make herself known to you as well after the session finishes. But yeah, there's some contact details in the grant guidelines as well. Contacting those contact details, they'll be able to put you into the right people that might be able to provide some advice or steer you in the right direction from a council perspective as well.
Thank you. I really appreciated the discussion on that last question. Evaluation criteria. I heard you say needs to have material benefit. Is that a clue? Is it articulated somewhere how these projects submissions will be evaluated, or what the weighting of the criteria will be?
It's heavily weighted towards removing barriers, right? So that barrier could be the sound bouncing around the room, right? There is, like I said, it is heavily skewed towards removing barriers, and you need to be able to identify that barrier, identify how it's going to be removed, and then there's a question around community benefit as well. I think if you've got something in mind, there's probably a good chance that you can articulate it in a way where it falls under the idea of universal design in tourism. Did you have something in particular? You want to build a flying fox? Fantastic. I'm on first, right? I want to try it first. Fantastic. If you want to make that inclusive, there are resources out there, and I do know of a few organisations that have done something similar around the harnessing and things like that. Absolutely, go for your life. Yep.
Just to add to that, I guess from similar to the last response I added to, obviously council perspective, we're here to see these grants succeed, and we want to make sure that they're being put to good use. So if you've got questions and queries like that, feel free to reach out, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can as well. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was very informative. Thank you very much. But the time frame for putting in the application, especially if you have to get 2 or 3 quotes for the project. I don't think that's enough. There's only, what, 5 weeks? Is it? 6 weeks, isn't it? You know how it is today with tradesmen, just to get quotes.
I might take that one, Ryan. I guess from council's perspective, we run similar grants of this size and magnitude, community grants, capital works grants, etc., that are up to a similar value. And I think most of those run between 4 to 6 weeks, and we generally are oversubscribed. So, I mean, with this opportunity, as Ryan's been touching on, probably once in a 20-year opportunity. You know, if we aren't oversubscribed, there's obviously a further opportunity down the track. But if you want to put in an application and talk to us about timelines and you know, keep us in the loop, I guess, around how long it might take you to get your quotes. We're obviously happy to have those conversations. We're here to make sure this succeeds and, you know, isn't a flop. So I guess it'd be remiss of me to forget to mention that the state government have funded this grant opportunity as well. So they're obviously keen to see these dollars spent in an appropriate way and manner, obviously the tourism sector as well.
So what's the difference between the Latrobe City contributions, 75% project cost and 25, and the other one is 50%. Which one do we have to apply for?
Quite simply,
non-for-profit contributions.
Well, you need to be a registered not-for-profit,
Yes.
or you need to be a small business. So
No,
there's the two streams. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, please? Even if you've got something in a little bit, you know, not sure. Yep.
Would it be okay to put in more than one application for different ideas?
Yeah, we'll need to get back to you on that one too. Thanks. Yeah.
Question probably more on a personal basis for you, Ryan. In accessing toilets, do you prefer the sliding doors or the, I believe they've got to be open out, the automated sensor open out ones? Which ones are...
I prefer the sliding doors.
Yeah, just less impedance. And,
Yep.
Thank you.
There's some really nuanced sort of thinking around that too. Like quite often the symbols that show if that door is locked or not locked aren't all that clear sometimes. So more often, not more often than not, but quite a few times I've seen people put A4 sticker, an A4 poster next to the controls that say, if the green light's on, it's open. If the red light's, like, you shouldn't have to explain those controls, but you know, quite often they do need to be explained. But just on that too, when it comes to door locks, like the manual door locks, you know how on the outside it will show you if it's locked or not? Sometimes it doesn't show you on the inside. You can get locks that show you on the inside if it's locked or not, right? So this is something really simple, but if you have a bad memory, or if you're not quite sure, if you're maybe suffering from dementia or any sorts of things and you're not quite sure if the door's locked, that can be something that's really triggering, quite unnerving. And what is that? That's like a $50 piece of hardware that you can install yourself. That's going to make somebody's life a little bit less stressful. So these are the things too. I want everybody in the room to sort of be creative about how they think about it, because it can be really, really small things. It doesn't have to be massive, great big projects. It can actually be those smaller, incremental updates that can really make people's lives that little bit better.
Oh, if there's no more from the floor, Ryan, I had a few lobs to start you off with.
Yep.
What should someone do, or anyone here tonight or anyone else looking to apply do if they think they might need a building or a planning permit for their project?
So building and planning permit will need to be applied for and submissions put in through the council, obviously. My understanding is that if those submissions are in, then you can apply for the funding. You don't obviously don't need to get the outcome, providing it's in the process.
Thank you. What should somebody do, or one of the organisations do, if they wish to contribute donated goods? as part of
Yeah.
their submission or their request for grant.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Like we have within the grants, there is an in-kind element, like I said before. So in-kind is any kind of contribution, kind of contribution that is not monetary. So it could be somebody's time, it could be donated goods, it could be anything that's not around that monetary element. So if you have somebody donating, let's say you've found somebody at a hardware store that's happy to give you those locks that I was just talking about, you need to make sure that those locks are of a decent quality. So, you know, probably second-hand ones that you found somewhere, probably not best to use those. Probably best to ensure that the elements that you're putting into your project are quality elements if they've been donated. And if you have any questions, obviously, check with council.
A really granular one here. If I was looking to modify a vehicle used for tourists or tourism with a successful grant, how would I go about that?
Yeah, so if you want to modify a vehicle so that it's got, for example, the lift at the back on the HiAce or a van, which I would love to see more of right across the sector. I think this is absolutely a gold mine and a real gap. If you were to have that lift installed in the van that you own, it would need to be done by somebody who's accredited and qualified, and it would need to be signed off. So it's not something you can sort of buy the lift and do it DIY. It would need to be done in the same way that you're going to have if you're going to have building works done. They would need to be done by somebody who's qualified and accredited. The same instance in this case with that vehicle modification.
Thanks. And last one from me before I look back to the room to see if there's any from the floor. The question was, are there any low cost? But I was wondering if maybe you give us your top 3 or 5 low cost changes that businesses could make through this grant process or opportunity.
Yep. I didn't expect you to put a number on it, but let's go there anyway. Look, really low cost. Things like rubber ramps for a threshold, and we're talking about those small kind of lips that may be an impediment to people. Maybe they're little trip hazards, or maybe you've seen people with wheelchairs kind of have a bit of difficulty with them, or rollers and strollers. Okay, great. You can buy a really low-cost rubber ramp. They're usually recycled plastic. Great, job done. Like, it's very, very low cost. You can even look at no-cost stuff. There's I won't tell you no cost. That sort of defeats the purpose. But things like tap heads, things like anything around contrast usually. So that includes controls like switches, anything that requires somebody to use hand function. So big switches, they call them rocker switches, which are great. Like if you have low dexterity, that's a real win. I don't know how much it costs to get the face of a switch installed and upgraded, but it can't be an awful lot. And again, that contrast is a really big win for a lot of people. And you get 2 for 1 because the dexterity element comes in as well. So that's another low cost. What else? I feel like the acoustic is fairly low cost, and I feel like that's a big win. Yeah, there's some. I've got a bit of a mental blank, so again, I'm just going to defer to council. Maybe we can get some of those up on the website, actually. Oh, there we go. Yeah, of course. It would be remiss of me not to show this because basically I'm under duress from Kylie to show you this. But if you were to have one of these created, this communication board, particularly great if you've got a venue. So you guys, looking at you guys in the front, something like that, if you don't have it already, is going to be super valuable for people who are maybe prefer to use this format of communicating. Yeah, really low cost, really useful. It's something you can adjust also as time goes by. If you find that people are using less of certain icons and there's some that are missing, you can change it the next year or the year after. But something like that is really simple and low cost element when it comes to offering that diversity of communication options. Are there any other questions? Come on, one more. Yes.
I'm not sure that it's a question, but I work at the visitor centre, and often we get lots of people come in with a pet, or they need assistance, or it is just their calming dog or whatever it is that they travel with.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of options to have your dog stay with you or your pet stay with you. I wonder if there is room in that space too for people to allow their pet to be included.
If it's an assistance animal, or if it's a seeing eye dog, like again sort of certified assistance animal, then yeah, absolutely. If you have an accommodation, if you're an accommodation provider, I would seriously be looking at that space. Like, there are a lot of accommodation providers that already allow for animals of all kinds, let alone, assistance animals. So I'd be looking at that as well. And it might not be, it sort of has a few facets to it as well. So it might be finding accommodation or providing that accommodation where there's pet relief areas, where there's, a specific place for the animal to stay, to sleep, different sort of facets to that. But yeah, absolutely, that falls into this grant. Yeah. I will just wrap up. There's one thing I want all of us to do, and usually I've heard your phone go off twice now, so we're gonna do everything. Can I get everybody to just grab their phones out just for a second, please, and just go to your calendar if you don't mind. Okay, so we're on the 11th. Can I just swipe forward 1 week, go to Monday 18th, and let's go to 2 o'clock. Yep. Great. Can you just type in UTG for me? Great. Everybody able to do that? Brilliant. All right. So, Monday the 18th, UTG. The reason I did that is because I want everybody to get a little bit of a reminder in a week's time. I know all you guys are incredibly busy. Thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. As I said before, I cannot overstate how important and how valuable this grant program is. It is really, really rare to have something like this. And again, I will say it again, if there's nothing in this for you, I think there will be, but share it with your friends, share it with people who you know are in the visitor economy, share it with people who run organisations or run small businesses who you think would really have an idea that to improve their offering. And as I said, tell everybody. This is a huge opportunity. I really want everybody in the room and in the region to take the advantage of this. It's remarkable. I want to come back in a year's time and go, wow, you guys have done incredible stuff. And I want to be talking to the products that you develop within this grant to everybody across Australia and say, look what they did. Have a look at what they did. That was incredible. And I want that to be you guys. So, here you go. No pressure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan. Cheers.